Welcome back to Night Stories from VHS era, where the warm glow of the 90s never truly fades. Can you still feel the thrill of rushing out the school gates, heart pounding, already thinking about the game you'd play before the sun dipped below the rooftops? Do you remember how your backpack barely hit the floor before you were out the door again, heading straight for your secret hideout? What was it about those afternoons that felt more magical than anything else? And what made a game of tag or hide and seek feel like the most important mission on Earth? Stay with me until the end of this video to remember how it truly felt to live for those after-school hours when the world was yours and time seemed to stretch just long enough for one more round of Capture the Flag. Tonight, I'll take you back there, and by the time the story closes, you'll understand just how sacred those ordinary afternoons really were. It always started with the bell, that final school bell, echoing down the painted hallways like a starting gun at a race. I remember how my heart would leap at the sound, how my hand would already be reaching for my backpack before the teacher could say, "Don't forget your homework." I'd stuff the folders in zipper half closed and bolt from the classroom with a kind of energy I rarely found anywhere else. The air outside always smelled the same sun-warmed pavement, newly cut grass, the distant scent of someone's laundry being tumbled dry. I didn't walk home. I ran, past the chain-link fence that bordered the school, past the sleepy crossing guard who never said much, and up our block that was still half lit by the lazy afternoon sun. Before I even turned the corner to our house, my mind was already there, at the spot, the hideout, the place behind the McKinsey's garage, where the blackberry vines curled like fingers and the grass grew just high enough to cover crouched knees. I could already see it, already feel the crunch of gravel under sneakers, the prickly touch of burrs clinging to socks. We didn't need to text anyone back then. We just showed up. We knew where to be. Sometimes I'd spot Aaron's red windbreaker disappearing into the alley, or hear Lily's laugh bouncing off the brick walls of the cul-de-sac. It was always a sign. The game was happening, and we didn't need to ask which one. We just knew. I'd burst into our house, shout a rushed "I'm home" toward the kitchen where Mom usually stood, chopping onions or folding laundry, and then toss my backpack into the nearest corner. My hand would already be on the door before she even turned around to ask about snacks. I didn't need snacks. Not yet. There wasn't time. The sun was moving, and every minute counted. Do you remember how time felt back then? How one afternoon could stretch like an endless summer? We didn't look at clocks. We looked at the sky. The golden hour was our cue. That's when the games were best, when the shadows got long and you could hide behind them. Our neighborhood was the perfect arena. It had everything: alleys, trees, fences low enough to climb and high enough to leap from, garage roofs slanted just so. We used what we had. That was part of the magic. Trash can lids became shields. Abandoned shopping carts turned into fortresses. One time, we even used an old refrigerator box we found by the curb as a hiding spot. I stayed in there for 15 minutes, holding my breath as Aaron passed by, inches from where I crouched. Wasn't it wild how seriously we took it? A game of tag could feel like life or death. If you got caught, it wasn't just being it was failure. It meant running slower, hiding worse. We had pride in those things, I practiced my hiding spots the way kids practice free throws. I knew exactly how long I could stay silent before someone suspected the bush behind the fence. There was a kind of language we all spoke without words, a gesture, a glance, a flick of a flashlight, and though we were just kids in faded jeans and light-up sneakers, we felt like we were part of something bigger, something ancient, like we'd tapped into a ritual passed down through generations of neighborhood kids who came before us. My favorite part, the silence right before the game began. That collective inhale as someone counted us, covered against the bark of a tree or the side of a house, shouting numbers through cupped hands. 1, 2, 3, and the rest of us darting off into shadows, behind sheds, under porches. The rush, that holy moment of stillness as you held your breath, heart pounding, waiting to see if you were safe, or if footsteps would come, crashing your way. We called it the safe zone, the porch steps at Aaron's house. Worn wood, peeling paint, and a creak that gave away anyone too slow to sneak. If you touched the banister before getting tagged, you were untouchable, a legend. And if you were brave enough to leave safety just to save someone else, you were something more. Did you ever do that? Risk your win to rescue a friend? I did, more than once. It made us heroes in our own little world. No trophies, just the gleam in someone's eye and a whispered thanks in the dark. I remember one afternoon when the clouds rolled in faster than we expected. Thunder rumbled just as we were starting our second game of Capture the Flag. Most kids would have gone inside, but not us. Not yet. Not with the flag still out there, fluttering like a beacon behind the old oak near the Reed's place. The grass was wet, the sky bruised purple, and everything smelled like rain, but we played anyway. We played like it was our last day on earth. I got soaked, slipped once, and ripped my jeans, but I still remember the exact moment my hand closed over that flag. Victory. Real victory. Nothing since has ever felt quite like that. And when the streetlights buzzed to life and parents started calling names into the wind, we would finally let the game go, just until tomorrow. We'd walk home, shoes muddy, elbows scraped, voices hoarse. From laughing and shouting, we'd stop by the corner store for a cherry Coke or a bag of Warheads if we had quarters jingling in our pockets. And by the time we hit our front steps, the sky would be velvet blue, and our hearts would still be thumping with the rhythm of the run dot. So, were those afternoons really as special as we remember? Was there something in the air, or something in us, that made them shine so bright? I believe so. I believe it every time I close my eyes and see the golden light filtering through the trees. Hear the distant yell of someone yelling, "Got you," or the sound of sneakers scraping pavement. I believe it because those moments weren't just games. They were our first tastes of freedom, of joy that didn't need permission. And now, as the world sleeps and your eyelids begin to fall heavy, let me leave you with this thought. What if all those small things we thought were just after-school games were actually the very moments that shaped who we are? What if every dash, every hiding place, every daring rescue wasn't just play but memory in its purest form? It was funny how simple it was back then, how effortless. If you wanted to play, you just knocked. That was it. No phones, no group chats, no waiting for someone to reply to a text. You simply walked to a friend's house, stood on the porch, and knocked on the screen door. Sometimes you didn't even say a word. You just stood there, looked through the mesh, and gave a single, knowing nod. It meant everything. It meant the game was on. Some days, I'd walk down our street like I had a mission, feet crunching over old leaves and acorns, sometimes dragging a stick along the sidewalk, crack for rhythm. I'd start at Aaron's house, tapping 3 times. On the doorframe, just below the rusted doorbell no one ever used. If I saw his face peek through the living room curtain, I knew. No need to speak. He'd meet me on the porch, already slipping into his light-up LA gears, and ask the only question that really mattered: who else? We didn't make plans. We followed the pattern, the unspoken order we'd memorized over countless seasons. Next was Lily's house. Her porch always smelled like cinnamon because her mom baked every afternoon. I'd knock gently, not wanting to wake her baby sister, and Lily would appear behind the glass, 2 fingers up like a peace sign. That meant she just needed 2 minutes. I'd wait. I always did. Do you remember that feeling? Waiting outside a friend's door, knowing they'd be out in just a minute, and that the rest of your afternoon depended on it. There was something exciting about the build-up, the way each door felt like part of an unfolding adventure. Some days, I'd knock on 6 or 7 doors before our group finally came together. But once we did, it felt like the whole world tilted into place. Bora. We'd say just that. One word, not even a question, really. More like a spell that summoned joy. If you know, you know. And we did. We all did. There was a comfort in how little we needed. No gear, no permissions. Just sneakers, sunlight, and each other. We met on the corner, near the cracked sidewalk, where the roots of the old elm tree pushed through the cement. That spot was sacred to us. It was the meeting point, the reset button, the place where we decided everything. What game, which yard, who was it, who had the flag today? Sometimes the older kids joined us. Devin, who was already in middle school, brought a kind of edge to the group. He was faster than all of us and never afraid to climb on roofs or leap fences like a movie stuntman. When he showed up, we played harder, ran faster, risked more. He made us feel like legends in training. Other times, it was just us regulars. Aaron, Lily, my little brother Kevin, who wasn't quite old enough to keep up, but always tried. Sometimes Melissa, the quiet girl who could disappear behind a bush so well that even the dogs couldn't sniff her out. She rarely talked, but when she did, it was always something clever. She had a hiding spot no one ever found, and she never told us where it was. That mystery made her almost mythical. We didn't always know who would be available. That was part of the fun. The knocking was like casting dice. Some doors would swing open with kids already tying their shoes. Others opened halfway with a sleepy can't today or a nod toward homework spread out on the kitchen table. But no one ever minded. We knew there was always someone else to find, another door to try. And when the group felt complete, even if it was just 4 of us, we'd start walking, sometimes without speaking, just the sound of gravel underfoot, a basketball bouncing in someone's driveway, the distant call of a lawnmower. We didn't need to talk. We just needed to move. Have you ever had friends like that? The kind you didn't need to impress or explain yourself to? The kind who understood that walking in silence together could mean more than any conversation. We'd take turns picking games. If it had rained recently and the grass was still slick, we'd go for tag because the risk of slipping made everything funnier. If it was dry, with long shadows across backyards, hide and seek was the obvious choice. And if we were feeling competitive, it was capture the flag, always. The flag was anything we had handy, a bandana, a sock. Once, it was a Burger King crown that someone found in a recycling bin. That day, we crowned the winner, literally, and it stayed a tradition after that. The flags didn't matter. It was the chase that counted, the adrenaline, the sense of a mission. We didn't need boundaries because we all understood the neighborhood. We knew which yards had dogs, which fences were too sharp to climb, which driveways were fair game. It was a territory carved by our own footsteps, familiar in the way a favorite blanket is. We ran it like veterans. Sometimes a parent would come out to call someone in. You'd hear a voice from a porch, long and drawn out, full name included. That was the warning shot. You usually had 5 more minutes after that. Just enough time to do one last run, one last rescue, one last stand. And we'd stretch those 5 minutes for all they were worth, sprinting like the end of a movie, hearts hammering, lungs burning, shouting each other's names like it was the last round of the day. Sometimes it was. Other times, the same kid would sneak back out after dinner and we'd pick up where we left off. We didn't keep score, not really. The only score that mattered was how many people showed up. The more, the better. There was power in numbers, energy that built with every new friend who joined. It made the streets come alive, like the neighborhood itself was rooting for us. And the knocking, that simple act of going to someone's house, reaching up and tapping your knuckles against painted wood, felt like a ritual. It taught us how to show up, how to ask for connection without a screen between us, how to say, "I'm here, are you?" I still remember the sound, the soft rap, rap, rap that echoed just enough to carry into the kitchen. The way footsteps would approach, muffled on carpet or clacking on tile. The sound of a door creaking open and the flash of a smile. That was all it took to start something magical. Even now, sometimes when I walk by houses on quiet streets, I imagine knocking again. I wonder what would happen if someone opened the door and recognized that old code. If they'd smile, step outside, and say, "Let me grab my shoes." That's the kind of magic we had. And the truth is, we didn't know how rare it was. Not then. We thought everyone lived like that, with a crew of kids ready to drop everything for a game, a dash, a secret mission. Maybe some people did, but for us, it wasn't just summer. It was a way of being. And it all started with a knock. Once we had gathered, once all the knocks had been answered and the last shoelace tied, we'd head toward the widest space we could find. Sometimes it was the street between our houses. Other times it was the vacant lot behind the fire station, where grass only grew in tufts and the dirt turned into dust clouds with every footstep. But more often than not, it was the cracked driveway behind the Patterson duplex, the place that still had faint lines from hopscotch games and tetherball tournaments of summers past. That spot, with its potholes and scattered pebbles, was our battlefield. One of us always carried chalk, usually Lily. She had a tin lunchbox that rattled with broken pieces in soft pastel colors: pink, blue, white, yellow. She'd kneel down on the concrete like a general drawing out her war plan, her hand smudged with dust, her tongue poking out in concentration. Sometimes we'd help. Other times we'd watch, waiting for her to sketch the boundaries of the world we were about to enter. There was something almost sacred about those lines. They weren't just drawings, they were borders, dividers between teams, safe zones, jail areas, flag bases, or just the place you had to reach before time ran out. Each line had meaning, and we all understood it, even without explaining. Soon as the chalk scraped across the surface, we were no longer just kids. We were players, runners, defenders, spies. Did you ever draw those lines yourself? Did your hand tremble with excitement as you marked the earth, knowing what came next? For us, each game started not with a whistle or a countdown, but with the sound of chalk meeting pavement, a low hiss, a scrape, and then the bold color left behind like a trail of possibility. The team picking came right after, and oh, how wild it was. No clipboards, no grown-ups, no rules except the ones we made up. Just voices raised in the afternoon air, shouting names, calling dibs, laughing when someone fake protested getting picked last. But we never really cared, not deep down, because no matter what side you ended up on, you knew you'd still be part of the same story. Some days we took turns picking team captains. Other days, the fastest kid from the last game got the honor. That meant Devon most of the time. Though sometimes we'd bend the rules and make Lily or Melissa captain just to shake things up. And the picking, you can imagine, errands with me. Someone would yell, pointing as if they were claiming an NBA draft pick. I get Lily. No way, you had her last time. She's my cousin. I call dibs. Laughter echoed through the whole block. It wasn't just about choosing the best players. It was about the performance. Picked a different best friend. The jokes about who would win just based on who had the loudest yell. We were kids, but in those moments, we were also actors, generals, poets. Once the teams were drawn, on our toes, full of energy and ideas, someone always came up with a game twist. Maybe the jail had to be under the lilac bush. Maybe you could only use your left hand to hold the flag. Maybe the it person had to wear a paper Burger King crown as a way of being marked. The rule, we all agreed, that was part of the unspoken code. The moment you stepped inside those chalk lines, you were part of something that mattered. Do you remember that feeling? The anticipation of the game, standing in your starting spot, muscles ready, watching the other side like they were your fiercest rivals. Even though you'd all be eating popsicles together on someone's porch an hour later. The chalk dust got everywhere. It clung to our palms, our knees, our elbows, even our cheeks when we wiped away sweat without thinking. Some of it ended up on our clothes, staining our jeans and t-shirts like badges of honor. Sometimes we wrote our team names on our arms. Other times we drew arrows or X's on the sidewalk to mark traps or secret paths. The world outside those chalk lines faded away. The noise of the street, the occasional bark of a dog, the metallic creak of a distant swing set, all of it became background. Music to the real action happening between those borders we had drawn ourselves. We sprinted, dove, shouted. We invented tactics on the spot. Someone would yell, "Fake left," and the rest of us would scatter like fireworks. We created diversions. One time, Kevin pretended to trip just to distract the other team, while Lily slipped across the chalk. border with the flag clutched to her chest. It worked. We howled with joy. Other times, it didn't go so well. Aaron once misjudged a leap over a crack in the sidewalk and went down hard, scraping his palm. He got up, grinning, blood mixing with dust, and said, "Totally worth it." He wore that scab like a trophy for the rest of the week. We lost track of time out there. The sun moved slowly, casting long golden beams that made the chalk lines glow like treasure maps. Shadows stretched across the field, shifting the game's landscape, giving us new places to hide or ambush from, changing, but always centered around those lines and those laughs. Sometimes neighbors peeked out from their windows. Mrs. Pruitt would smile and shake her head, muttering something about noisy kids, but she never told us to stop. I think she liked hearing us. I think a part of her remembered when she did the same thing, maybe in another town, another decade. One afternoon, just before the streetlights came on, we drew the biggest battlefield yet, the entire width of the alley behind the Reynolds house. It took 2 pieces of chalk just to finish the outer lines. We made it a 3-team game, split across quadrants, with 1 flag hidden in each corner. It was chaos, glorious, unstoppable chaos. We ran so much that day, our legs turned to jelly, our faces were beet red. At one point, we all collapsed in the middle, laughing so hard we couldn't breathe. We kicked up, and in that moment, lying on the warm concrete, surrounded by friends and giggles and smudged chalk, it felt like we had built our own little kingdom, and maybe we had. The next rain meant more than anything drawn on a map. Maybe, just maybe, those simple shapes taught us how to work together, how to fight fair, how to win and lose with laughter in our lungs. When it was time to go home, we didn't erase anything. We left it there, the colors, the marks, the proof that we had been there, that we had played, that we had lived. And the next day, if the rain hadn't come, we'd start again from the same lines. Maybe we'd add a few more. Maybe we'd redraw them entirely. It always was. So, if you ever come across an old chalk line on a forgotten sidewalk, faded by sun and time, stop for a moment. Look closer. Listen. You might just hear the echo of laughter, of feet running, of someone shouting, "I got the flag." As the wind carries the last notes of a summer song long gone, the chalk lines faded behind us, but the game never truly ended. Not when the rules were etched in our hearts, not when the whole neighborhood became our map, our maze, our wild frontier. As the sun dipped lower and the wind picked up that warm, dry scent of late afternoon, we knew the next phase was beginning. It was time to leave the open field and vanish into the alleys, the backyards, the winding trails between fences and hedges. We became adventurers then, not just players, real explorers, the kind who knew every hidden gate, every garden path, every shortcut behind someone's garage. It didn't matter that we lived in a quiet suburban block just off Willow Avenue. In our eyes, it was a jungle, a battlefield, a kingdom we ruled with scraped knees and grass-stained shirts. Do you remember what it felt like to run without destination, just to follow the flow of feet and the call of the wind? To leap over a fence like you were escaping from a fortress, or duck beneath a low-hanging branch like you were dodging a trap. That's how we moved through those golden hours, like we belonged to the land and it belonged to us. Some yards had barking dogs, and we'd tiptoe along the edges, whispering like spies. Others had sprinklers going, and we'd race through them on purpose, soaked and shrieking, not caring at all about shoes or soggy socks. We knew where the hidden holes were in chain-link fences, the ones just wide enough to squeeze through sideways. We knew which garden gnomes could be gently lifted aside to reveal a perfect hiding spot. The alley behind the grocery store was one of our favorite routes. It always smelled like cardboard and apples, and there were stacked crates we'd climb, like a staircase to the roof of the shed behind Mr. Diaz's shop. That shed became our lookout tower. From there, we could see 3 blocks in every direction. It felt like standing on a mountain, a dusty, splintered mountain with peeling white paint and initials carved into the sideproof that others had come before us. We ran. Oh, how we ran, past the Johnson's garden with its perfect rows of tomatoes, around the big oak tree that had roots thick enough to trip anyone not paying attention, across the narrow footbridge that spanned the creek just behind Lily's backyard. That creek wasn't deep barely more than a trickle-butt in our minds. It was a raging river, and crossing it was a heroic feat. We chased each other through hedges, whispering to stay low, to move fast. Go left, someone would call, ducking into the shade of a tool shed. Another would leap over a wheelbarrow like a hurdle. Our hearts beat loud, not just from the running, but from the story we were writing as we moved. We weren't just kids playing. We were adventurers on a mission. Each backyard a different chapter. Once, during a particularly intense round of Capture the Flag, I dove behind a row of potted plants in the Martins' yard. They had this long trellis covered in morning glories, and I remember lying flat on my stomach, breathing in the scent of the flowers and damp soil, waiting for footsteps. I felt invisible, powerful, hidden in plain sight, just me and the bees, buzzing softly like an ambient soundtrack. Another time, Aaron climbed a tree so high we all held our breath. He perched there like a scout, calling down directions in a voice full of glee and fearlessness. They're headed to the alley. Cut them off near the garage. We obeyed instantly, like soldiers taking commands. And when he finally dropped back to the ground with a thud and a laugh, we cheered like he'd conquered Everest. The fences were our borders, our obstacles, our gates. Some were easelo wooden pickets we could vault in a single move. Others had to be climbed with care. Chain link giving way under the pressure of sneakers, fingers hooking into the wire for balance. We developed techniques. Aaron always used a run and jump method. Lily climbed like a cat, nimble and fast. I preferred a slower, more strategic approach. Foot here, hand there. Swing the leg over and land softly. Sometimes we got caught, not by grown-ups usually, but by the fences themselves. One day, Kevin's hoodie got snagged on a nail and he hung there for a second, arms flailing, like a flag waving in surrender. We all burst out laughing before helping him down. Another time, Melissa tripped on a hose and rolled into a flower bed and emerged with petals stuck in her hair. She looked like a woodland fairy and didn't even mind. The alleyways were our secret roads, narrow, cracked, lined with trash bins and mysterious doors we never dared to open. They always felt cooler than the streets, shaded by overhanging trees or leaning garages. We used them to disappear, to outflank the other team, to stage surprise attacks. If you needed to sneak somewhere, the alley was your best friend. Sometimes the game paused, not officially, not with any announcement, but naturally. We'd find ourselves all gathering under the same tree or sitting in a circle on someone's porch, panting, sipping water from the hose. And then the stories began. Did you see when I rolled under the swing set? I was hiding in the bushes behind the grill the whole time. I thought you were on our team. We'd laugh and tease and argue, but it was all love. Number scoreboards, no prizes, just the thrill of movement, of invention, of existing together in a world we made up as we went, as dusk crept in and the sky turned the color of ripe plums. Our imaginations shifted to the neighborhood transformed once. More, it became quieter, more mysterious. The same bushes that had hidden us now whispered secrets in the breeze. The fences felt taller, the alleyways darker, and suddenly the stakes of the game changed. It wasn't just a chase anymore. It was a quest, a rescue, a final stand before the kingdom went to sleep. One evening, just before curfew, we played a game we called Final Run. One kid had to carry the flag from the farthest yard back to the base without getting caught. It was like everything we'd practiced all summer wrapped into one impossible challenge. That night, it was me. I remember holding the flaga, simple blue bandana knotted at one end dand, staring down the route ahead. I ran like I never had before, through backyards, over fences, under clotheslines, through gardens and narrow alleys. I saw Erin's shadow darting just behind me, heard Lily's laugh as she shouted directions, felt the blood pounding in my ears. The world blurred into color and sound, adrenaline and joy. And when I finally crossed the chalk line at the base, flag still clutched in my fist, the cheer that went up from the others felt like winning something much bigger than a game. I knew it would fade. The chalk would wash away. The fences would be repainted. The gardens would change. But that night, we had ruled the kingdom. And for a little while, we had been the bravest adventurers in the world. There was a special kind of silence that came right before the seeker began counting. Not total silence, the cicadas still buzzed in the trees. A screen door creaked somewhere down the block. A car passed with a soft hum, but it was a silence. Inside us, the kind that made everything else sharpen. Our eyes darted, our muscles tensed, and we scattered like leaves in the wind. Hide and seek wasn't just a game. It was a craft, a science, an art form. And those of us who played it, way we did, knew that choosing the right hiding spot could mean the difference between glory and defeat. We took it seriously. Our strategy began long before the count ever started. We knew our terrain. We knew the way light fell at certain times of day, which bushes had gaps in the back, which trash bins rolled too easily, which trees had low branches, perfect for climbing, and which fences had that narrow space just big enough for a skinny kid to slip behind. We had mapped the neighborhood in our minds, but more importantly, we felt it. We sensed which spots were worth the risk. Have you ever crouched in a hiding place, so still, so quiet, you could hear your own heart thudding in your chest, felt your breath catch as footsteps crunched on gravel just feet away? That feeling, that mix of fear and excitement, was what made hide and seek so different. It wasn't about speed, not this time. It was about patience, intuition, stillness. Lily was the queen of hiding. She could vanish into thin air. One moment she'd be beside you, whispering about a plan, and the next she'd be gone, completely absorbed by the shadows of a hedge or the dark corner behind the garden shed. I once walked past her 3 times and never noticed until she emerged, giggling, victorious. She had a gift. She didn't just hide. She became the hiding spot. Aaron, on the other hand, preferred elevation. He loved trees. He'd climb to the crook of an old maple and stay perfectly still, even with branches poking into his side. His eyes would scan the ground below like a hawk, waiting to strike or flee. We teased him once, said he was part squirrel. He didn't mind. He just grinned. I loved hiding behind trash bins, where the angles of garages and fences met and the shadows stretched like arms. There was something about the way light and dark played together. How I could tuck myself into a space where no one expected a person to be. One time, I squatted behind an old compost bin for nearly 15 minutes, listening as the seeker passed by twice, talking to himself, muttering about how they had to be here somewhere. I didn't move an inch, not even when a spider crawled over my arm. Kevin liked hiding under things, porches, decks, old crawl spaces. Once, he slid beneath a wooden ramp behind the school, where weeds and empty chip bags lived, and waited until everyone else gave up. When he finally came out, covered in dust and spiderwebs, he looked like he'd survived a war. But oh, how he laughed. There were rules, of course, not written ones, but understood. You didn't hide in anyone's house. That was cheating. No locked gates, no sheds with padlocks, no climbing onto actual rooftops, though Devin did that once and got grounded for a week when his mom found out. But everything else, fair game. Our countdowns were theatrical. Ready or not, here I come, shouted across the yard like a warning bell. And then the hunt began. The seekers' footsteps were always louder than they thought. We could hear them coming from half a yard away. Sometimes they tried to fake us out, walking one way, then doubling back. We were wise to that. We held our breath. That was the hardest part, the waiting. Not the initial dash to the hiding spot, not the crouching or curling up in a ball behind a bush, but the waiting. You had to stay still. You couldn't peek. You couldn't whisper. Every noise was a risk. Every movement was betrayal. The leaves crackled beneath us. Mosquitoes buzzed in our ears. Our knees ached from crouching. Our backs stiffened from stillness. But we endured, because when you weren't found, when your hiding place remained secret until the very end, there was no better feeling. It was as if you had outwitted the entire world. Do you remember the thrill of staying hidden until the very last second, of hearing the seeker call, all clear, and realizing you had won, not by outrunning anyone, but by outwaiting them? That quiet kind of victory felt different. It felt earned. Sometimes we shared spots. Melissa and I once hid behind the old tool shed, squeezed together like sardines. We didn't say a word for almost 10 minutes, just stared straight ahead, barely breathing. Afterward, when we were found at the same time, we burst out laughing. Not because we lost, but because we had done it together. We rotated seekers often. No one wanted to be it twice in a row, but some were better than others. Devin was fast, sharp-eyed. Lily was patient, clever. Kevin tried to make deals. I won't tag you if you tell me where Aaron is. We didn't take him up on it, of course, but it made the game funnier. The seeker had their own strategy, too. They learned to look in familiar places first, then the obscure ones. They learned to listen. The best seekers were quiet, the ones who snuck up on you like ghosts. Once, I was hiding in a cluster of shrubs behind the Andersons' garden, knees tucked into my chest, arms wrapped tight. The leaves brushed my cheeks. I heard someone approaching, slow, deliberate steps on gravel. I froze. They stopped just a few feet away. My heart was pounding. I could hear it in my ears. And then, nothing. They turned and walked away. I stayed, hidden for 5 more minutes, just in case. When I finally emerged, the game was over. I hadn't been found. It felt like magic. We played until our bodies ached, until the light was so dim we couldn't see where the bushes ended and the fences began, until our parents' voices began calling us home from porches and kitchen windows, reminding us that dinner was waiting, that bedtime was near. And even then, we begged for one more round. Just one, please. The best hiding spots became legends. We gave them names: the tunnel under the porch, the eagle's nest, that high branch in the maple tree, the bunker behind the green trash bins, beside the garage. We marked them in our memory, passed them down to the younger kids as rites of passage. But some spots, some we kept to ourselves, our secret sanctuaries, our invisible corners of the world. As we walked home, dusty and tired, sometimes we pointed out where we had been. You passed me twice, I'd say with pride. Or I was in the lilac bush the whole time. And the others would groan, laugh, call us sneaky. But we all knew the truth. It wasn't about tricking each other. It wasn't even about winning. It was about the thrill of being part of something bigger. The story we were writing together, one hiding spot at a time. And when I close my eyes now, so many years later, I can still feel that cool breeze on my face. Still hear the crunch of footsteps drawing near. Still see the shadow of someone passing right by, never knowing I was there. Still hidden, still winning. Some moments back then felt bigger than life, larger than the block we played on, greater than the games we invented. They pulsed with the kind of joy that made your chest rise with something you couldn't explain, not even to yourself. It happened every time someone got tagged just inches before reaching home base, or when a flag was snatched out of the air and a daring escape began across the yard. That rush, that shout, that moment, it was electric, and we celebrated it like we had just won gold. There was nothing small about our victories, no modest smiles, no silent high fives. Our triumphs exploded into the air like fireworks. The moment someone tagged the last runner or managed to escape from enemy territory with the flag held high, the world changed. The game paused. The sky seemed to brighten. The earth, even in its silence, seemed to applaud us. Do you remember what it was? Like to scream at the top of your lungs without fear. To yell, "I got it," so loud the whole neighborhood heard you. To be cheered, not just by your team, but sometimes even by your opponents, because the play was just that good. I do. One day, late in August, we were in the final round of what had been a 4-hour stretch of capture the flag. It had been one of those perfect days, sunny, but not too hot, with just enough breeze to keep the sweat from sticking. The teams were even. Everyone was on edge. The score was tied, if you could call it a score. It wasn't something we wrote down. It was something we felt. You could sense it in the silence, in the quick glances exchanged between players. Lily had the flag. I can still see it. A red t-shirt tied to a broomstick, planted in the back corner of the yard behind the shed. That was our flag, sacred, untouched since the last reset. And somehow, in the chaos of a distraction we hadn't even planned, Lily had crept through enemy lines, crouched low through the lilacs, slipped behind the row of trash bins, and seized it. We didn't even notice at first. Then we heard it. Go. That was all she said, but it echoed, carried over the fences, shattered the quiet. And we turned to see Hura, flash of movement, long hair streaming behind her, the flag raised high like a torch. Everything stopped. For just a moment, the whole neighborhood paused. Then came the chase. 3 of us ran after her, Devin, Aaron, and me. We split paths. One went around the shed, another cut through the vegetable garden. I vaulted the short fence, trying to intercept her by the gate. She darted like wind, feet barely touching the ground. She rounded the garage, slid across the dirt path behind the alley, came within inches of colliding with the neighbor's tricycle. And then, in a single leap that I still replay in slow motion in my mind, she crossed the chalk line. She made it, flag in hand. She fell to her knees with the momentum, dust rising around her like smoke after a cannonball, and we erupted. All of us, even the ones who had tried to stop her. Even Melissa, who'd been guarding the midpoint, clapped her hands and shouted. That was insane. Lily stood up, grinning ear to ear, face flushed, arms open wide, like she'd just flown. Victory, she yelled, spinning in a circle with the flag fluttering like a cape. And for that moment, she wasn't just a girl from our block. She was a champion. The kind who wins medals and breaks records and gets remembered forever in backyard legend. We lifted her like she was the hero of a sports movie, hoisting her up with laughter and chants. Lily, 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 and she played along, bowing dramatically, blowing kisses to the invisible stadium. That was how we celebrated, not just when we won, but when something amazing happened, when someone made a daring escape, when a hiding spot was so clever it fooled everyone, when a tag was made with the lightest touch right before the finish line. We shouted, we danced, we threw ourselves onto the grass and laughed until our stomachs hurt. There was a time when Aaron did a diving tag across the sidewalk, skidding on his elbows just to touch Kevin's ankle. He landed hard, elbows scraped, knees bruised, palms full of gravel. But when we saw it, when we saw that moment where time seemed to freeze and Aaron's fingers tapped Kevin's foot a millisecond before home base, we lost it. All of us. We cheered like we were watching the Olympics. He sat up, bleeding and beaming, and just raised his hands like a heavyweight boxer. Did you see that? He gasped. We did. And we never forgot it. Sometimes the celebrations were quieter, like the time Melissa, who barely spoke during the games, managed to sneak the flag all the way to base without anyone noticing. No one saw it until she placed it gently on the chalk line and said, softly, game over. We didn't shout then. We just looked at her in awe, and she smiled, shy and proud. But most of the time, the joy was loud. Joy should be loud. We'd slap hands, jump in circles, shout nicknames we invented on the spot. The Phantom, Lightning Feet, Ninja, Lily. We crowned champions with upside-down frisbees or Burger King crowns left over from lunch. We handed them the broken chalk pieces like trophies, posed with them on tree stumps like it was a winner's podium, because in our eyes it was. Have you ever celebrated something so hard that you forgot it wasn't real, that it was just a game? But it was real, real enough to stay with us even now, real enough to remember the sound of victory echoing through the alleyways, real enough to feel the pride in your chest like a spark you wanted to hold forever. And maybe that's the beauty of it. We didn't need medals. We didn't need spectators. We had each other. We had the joy of movement, of mischief, and every flag captured, every tag made in the final second felt like the world had just opened up and shouted back, "You did it." I can still hear those echoes sometimes when I walk past an empty yard, when I see a red shirt caught on a fence, when a gust of wind carries a laugh through the trees, and I smile, because somewhere in the memory of that game, we are still celebrating, still running, still lifting each other up and yelling like champions, still winning. Some of the loudest words of our childhood didn't come from victory cries or battle plans, but from that one sudden universal call that made time itself pause in the middle of the game. Time out. It always rang out sharply, like a bell, of concern and command, echoing through backyards and alleyways like a siren we all understood. The world didn't stop for many things back then, but when someone got hurt, every dropped everything. I can still picture it. One moment we'd be mid-chase, legs flying over pavement, hearts pounding, shouts filling the air like a thunderstorm. Then, in the space of a breath, it would happen. Someone slipped on a loose stone, missed a jump, or ran straight into a low-hanging branch they'd forgotten was there. A sharp yelp, a stumble, and then the call, time out. We didn't question it. We didn't argue. We didn't finish the point or try to sneak a tag before the clock paused. We stopped cold, like statues frozen in place. Because in our world, timeout wasn't just about the game. It was about each other. Did you ever hold your breath as you rushed to check if someone was okay, even when you didn't know what to say when you got there? That quiet moment of waiting right before the kid who fell sat up, dusted off their shorts, and gave that brave half-laugh that meant, "Yeah, I'm fine." That laugh always came, even through scrapes, even through tears. Aaron was the king of that laugh. He'd fall more often than any of us, not because he was clumsy, but because he played harder. He was the one diving head first, leaping the highest, running without looking. We used to say the sidewalk loved Hemet, kept giving him kisses on his knees. He'd land hard, cry out, then sit up with a goofy grin and say something like, "Did you see that roll? That was pro level." And suddenly we were laughing too. There was never drama in it, never fear, because we knew these moments. We were used to blood mixing with dirt, the sting of a scrape under cold water from a hose, the way a Band-Aid never stuck properly if you were still sweating. And we knew how to make it feel better. A joke, a high five, a nickname for the injury. Nice one, Scarface. Looks like Kevin's earning his battle badge today. Even the smallest cut felt like proof that we were alive, that we were trying, that we weren't just watching the summer go by. We were living it with all the force we had. I remember the day. Lily tripped, running around the back corner of the Patterson house. She hit the ground hard. Her elbows scraped across the concrete. Her glasses flew off into the grass. We froze. Devon shouted, "Time out," before her hands had even hit the ground. I remember the silence. I remember the way we all rushed over, everyone speaking at once. "You okay, Lily? Talk to us." "I think I saw a rock there." She sat up slowly, eyes blinking in the sun. There was a streak of blood on her forearm, dust clinging to her skin. She looked at us, then looked at her elbow and said, "Ugh, this shirt's totally ruined." And then she laughed, a real laugh, bright, open, full of life. We all cracked up with her. We helped her up. Melissa offered her a clean tissue from her pocket, even though it had a sticker stuck to it. Aaron brought her glasses, bent but not broken. Devon offered her his water bottle, which she politely refused because it tasted like metal. And then, almost without thinking, someone whispered, "Game on." Lily stood, wiped her face, held up her elbow like a badge of honor, and said, "Let's go." Just like that, time started again. We didn't need a referee. We had each other. Sometimes the wounds were less visible. Twisted ankles, jammed fingers, a stubbed toe that made you limp but not stop. We learned to play through them, not because we were tough, but because we cared more about being part of the story than sitting it out. We didn't want to miss the next great moment, the next impossible tag, the next laugh that echoed for blocks. Even when someone had to sit down, they weren't left out. We brought the game to them. I remember one summer when Kevin sprained his wrist climbing the fence behind the hardware store. He had a bandage wrapped around it for weeks, but he still came to every game. We gave him a job flag guard. He took it seriously, sat next to the base like a royal sentry, arms crossed, shouting fake warnings to anyone who came too close. And when someone captured the flag while he was there, he'd shout, "I was distracted. You tricked me." We'd all laugh, including him, because even hurt, even sitting on the sidelines, we made sure no one was left behind. Have you ever looked at a scar years later and smiled? Not because of the pain, but because of what it meant. That you lived, that you tried, that you were there. Those were our real trophies, invisible ones, etched not in gold or silver, but in skin and memory. We didn't compare wounds like soldiers, but we honored them just the same. That one, I might say, pointing to a scar just above my knee. That's from the day I tried to slide under the sprinkler and hit the edge of the sidewalk. This one, Aaron would grin, lifting his shirt just slightly. I got that chasing Devon through the Reynolds garden, knocked right into a wheelbarrow. We wore our scrapes like medals, not for pain, but for participation, for joy, for going all in. Sometimes we'd slow the game after someone got hurt. Not stop, just soften. Less running, more hiding. Less diving, more sneaking. But it never lasted long, because before we knew it, someone would shout, "Bet you can. Catch me." And the chase would start again. It wasn't that we ignored the pain. It was that we laughed through it, laughed with it, welcomed it as part of the story. Because in the end, a scrape wasn't an ending. It was just another mark on the map of the summer dot. And now, all these years later, when I walk past a quiet yard or hear kids shouting in the distance, I sometimes touch those old scars. They've faded. Some you can barely see. But I remember every one, not for the moment of the fall, but for what came after. The pause, the care, the laugh, the restart, the sound of someone shouting, "Time out," followed always by the whisper of the world saying back, "It's okay, let's keep playing. We never noticed the time slipping by. Not in any real way. Not the way grown-ups checked their watches or glanced at the sky with furrowed brows. For us, time didn't move in hours or minutes. It moved in shadows, in laughter, in the rising warmth of the pavement under our hands, in the changing tone of the breeze that whispered through the neighborhood trees. We only knew the day was ending when everything started to glow. The golden hour, we called it without knowing what it meant. The part of the afternoon where the sun lowered just enough to set the world on fire in the softest, warmest way possible. Light draped itself over rooftops, spilled through tree branches, and made even the dust in the air sparkle like something magical. And we, covered in dirt and chalk, sun-kissed and panting, played on without realizing we were stepping into the final chapter of the day. Have you ever seen a sky so orange it felt like a painting? So rich and warm that even the shadows on the ground turned amber as if dipped in honey. I remember those skies. I remember the way the sun stretched out longer and longer, shadows across the grass until our legs looked 10 feet tall. We didn't talk about the light. We didn't point to the sky and say, "Look how beautiful that is." We were kids. We just lived inside it. But deep down, I think we knew. The light felt different in that hour. Softer, slower, more like a goodbye than a beginning. That's when our games would begin to drift. We'd still run, still hide, still chase, but everything took on a slower rhythm. Our bodies, after hours of movement, started to feel the weight of the day. Our breath came heavier. Our laughter was lower now, more like humming than shouting. We didn't call for timeouts anymore. We didn't need them. The whole neighborhood was gently slowing down. You could hear it, too. Fewer cars on the road, radios playing faintly from open kitchen windows, someone's mom calling a younger sibling in for dinner, the clang of a spoon in a saucepan, the bark of a dog that had finally tired of watching us sprint across its lawn, and the light-tow, that light. It made everything look like it belonged to a storybook. Even the fences seemed softer in that glow. The chipped paint on garage doors turned golden. The dust on the sidewalk shimmered, and our scraped knees and messy hair. Somehow we looked heroic, like explorers returning home at the end of a long journey. Do you know the feeling of being fully alive without realizing it until much later? That was what the golden hour gave us. We weren't just children playing. We were part of something timeless, something that couldn't be scheduled or captured, only remembered. Melissa would sometimes sit at the edge of the lawn, elbows on her knees, just staring at the light. She didn't speak much in those moments, but you could tell she was watching the sun with a kind of quiet reverence, like she understood it was saying goodbye to us. And in a way, it was. There was always a point where the game just stopped. Not all at once, not like a switch flipping off, but slowly, naturally, like a song fading out. One by one, kids would sit down, lay back in the grass, start talking instead of tagging. Someone would stretch out their legs and sigh, and we'd all hear it without needing to respond. We knew no one wanted to say it. No one wanted to end it. So instead, we let the evening carry us toward the finish. I remember one evening especially. The sky was this blend of oranges and soft purples, the kind of colors that don't even seem real unless you've seen them yourself. We had just finished a final round of tag, slow and laughter-filled, no one really trying that hard anymore. Lily flopped onto her back in the grass and pointed upward. "Look," she said simply. And we did. No one needed to ask what we were looking at. The clouds had turned gold at the edges, like someone had lit them from within. The air smelled like warm earth and dry leaves. That's the thing about childhood. There are no big speeches, no dramatic endings. Just a group of tired kids staring at the sky, hearts full from nothing more than a day well spent. It always felt a little sad, not a heavy sadness, just that quiet, hollow tug you get when something beautiful is ending. We didn't cry, we didn't complain, but deep in our chests, we all knew it. That this light, this soft, magical light meant goodbye. Goodbye to today. Goodbye to this version of ourselves. Because even though we'd play again tomorrow, it would never be quite the same. And still, we stayed outside as long as we could. Delay it. Make excuses to stretch the day. One more round. One more hiding spot. Let's just sit here for 5 more minutes. We'd trace shapes in the dirt with our fingers. Talk about what snack we hoped our moms had waiting at home. Aloud if the sprinkler would be out again tomorrow. And all the while, the light would fade, slowly, tenderly, like it was tucking us in, outside. Long before we got to our beds, that golden light did something to us. It made our memories glow. It wrapped our scraped elbows and tired feet in something soft. It said, "You were here, you lived this." And even now, after all these years, I still chase that light. Sometimes I catch it in a reflection on a rainy evening, or in the haze of headlights on an old street, or in a dream that feels too far away to be real. But I remember what it meant. I remember how it felt to be 11 years old and glowing from the inside out, not because of anything we owned or anything we did, but because we were outside, together, in the light of something that didn't need to last forever to matter. The sky turned orange, and we stayed, because childhood didn't come with clocks, it came with light. It always began the same way, subtle, soft, almost part of the wind, one voice at first, drifting over rooftops and trees like a ribbon of sound. Dinner time, then another, a little sharper, a little closer. Come on in now. And just like that, the spell of the game began to unravel, not because we wanted it to, not because we were done, but because the real world had remembered us again. Have you ever heard the end of the day before you saw it? Not in the sky or the temperature, but in the sound of your name floating through the evening air, carried by a mother's voice full of warmth and quiet finality. It wasn't harsh, it wasn't rushed, it was more like a lullaby, a reminder that though the kingdom we'd built that day was grand, it had to be left behind. For now, the porches lit up before the streetlights did. One by one, yellow glows blinked on across the neighborhood like stars appearing at dusk. Some doors creaked open. Some screen doors slammed shut with a familiar thwack. We barely noticed. "Kevin, let's go," she'd sing out from the steps, one hand on her hip, the other holding a dish rag. No anger, just that tone. Every kid knew the one that said you had 5 minutes, maybe 10, if you played your cards right. Then Melissa's dad would whistle, loud, one sharp note, echoing down the street like a referee's signal. She'd roll her eyes and mutter, "Okay, okay," and we'd all giggle, knowing she never wanted to be the first to leave. Lily's mom called her by her full name, middle name and all, and when we heard it, we knew it was serious. that meant she was already 5 minutes late. She'd bolt upright from the grass and yell, "Gotta go," then dart off with a quick bye. That trailed behind her like a kite tail. We didn't protest. Not really. We'd grown, maybe, or pretend not to hear. But deep down, we understood. That chorus of moms calling from porches was the punctuation mark at the end of the sentence. The period on the page, the closing of the chapter. Sometimes I wonder how they timed it so perfectly. Did they watch the sky? Did they listen for the quiet? Or did they just feel it did shift in the wind, the length of the shadows, the way our voices began to mellow? Somehow they always knew, even in the middle of laughter, we could hear them. It was like their voices carried through dimensions, cutting through the magic without breaking it. We never resented it, because those calls were made of love, woven with care and routine and the knowledge that tired legs and full hearts needed. Food, baths, rest. I remember once, Devin didn't answer his mom's first 2 calls. He was hiding, wedged between a hedge and a trash bin, trying to win the last game of the night. When she called a 3rd time, sharper, more direct, we all froze. He climbed out slowly, brushing leaves off his shirt. "Game's over," he said with a shrug. And it was. There was always a pause when the first player left. A little hole in the rhythm, a missing laugh, a glance passed between the rest of Usudu. We keep going, start another round, but it never really worked. Like a balloon with a small leak, the energy just slowly faded until someone else stood up, stretched their arms, and said, "I better go to Enso." We scattered, one by one, like birds leaving a wire. I always stayed till the end, not because I wanted to win, not because I was avoiding home, but because I loved that quiet after. Everyone else left. I'd sit on the curb with my elbows on my knees, watching the last rays of sunlight melt behind the trees. I could still hear the echo of the day footsteps, laughter, someone yelling, "Gotcha." In my mind, it wasn't sadness, just a kind of sweet, warm ache. Then I'd hear her, my mom, not loud, not rushed, just my name, spoken gently from the front porch, a little sing-songy, with a pause at the end like an open door. And I'd stand up, brush off my shorts, maybe grab a forgotten baseball cap or a dropped candy wrapper, and start the slow walk home. The sounds changed as I moved, less rustling of leaves, more clinking of dishes, the smell of dinner drifting. From windows, spaghetti sauce, baked chicken, something fried, televisions murmuring behind curtains, the thrum of the real world returning. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of a friend being tugged indoors, their parent's arm around their shoulder. Sometimes I'd wave. Sometimes they'd wave back. But mostly we just smiled. We didn't need words. We'd had the whole day to speak with running feet and grass-stained knees. Do you remember that final moment of the day? When the door closed behind you and the outside sounds faded away? When your skin was still warm from the sun, your clothes smelled like earth, and your hands had the faintest traces of chalk or tree bark? That was the moment the game truly ended, not with the porch calls, but with the return to stillness. There was comfort in it, in the ritual, in the way it happened over and over again, each evening, like the one before. The game began with backpacks dropped on porches and ended with a parent's voice calling you home. Every time, and though we grew older, though the games changed, and the porches eventually quieted, I still carry those calls with me. They echo softly in my memory, not just as endings, but as reminders that we belonged, that someone was waiting, that no matter how far we ran, how deep we hid, someone always knew our name, always called us back when the day was done. It was a sweet, familiar chorus, a lullaby for childhood. The day was done, but the story wasn't. Not really, not ever. After the porch calls faded and the neighborhood fell silent, after the last light blinked out and the shadows grew long and soft inside my room, the world of the day lingered, followed me quietly into bed, wrapping around my thoughts like a favorite blanket. Have you ever lain still in the dark, your eyes closed, but your mind alive, still hearing the distant echoes of laughter, the patter of running feet, the sharp, joyful shouts of your it, carried like a secret through the night air? That was how the day whispered goodbye, but never truly left. I remember lying in bed, tangled in warm sheets, the summer breeze sneaking through the cracked window. The world outside was silent, yet inside my head the games played on. The scrape of a sneaker against concrete, the steady beat of a heart daring to outrun the sun. Sometimes, just before sleep came, the scenes would play again, like an old VHS tape rewinding, the secret hideouts beneath bushes. And in those moments, I wasn't alone. I was there again with my friends, running, wild and free, carried on waves of pure, unfiltered joy. Did you ever feel that? That the best parts of the day don't end when your eyes close, that they live in the spaces between waking and dreaming, in the quiet corners of your heart? I did, and I still do. It was as if the laughter had become part of me, part of the rhythm of my breathing, the pulse beneath my skin, a secret soundtrack no one else could hear, but I knew by heart. It was the sound of childhood itself, messy, loud, tender, and full of life. Sometimes, as the night deepened and the hum of the world grew softer, I would smile to myself, because even though the games were over, the magic remained. The games didn't stop. They simply changed form. They slipped into dreams, blossomed in memories, and grew in stories told under starlit skies years later. And the footsteps they echoed onto, not just the ones on the pavement, but the ones in our hearts, the ones that remind us where we came, from who we were, and how to find joy again. The ones that say, keep running, keep playing. I think that's why I always treasure those quiet moments in bed, when the world is still and the past hums softly around me. Because in those moments, I am home, not in a place, but in a feeling of belonging to something bigger than myself. A feeling of endless summers, of sunlit laughter, of friends who never really leave. And maybe that's the greatest gift of all, to know that no matter how much time passes, no matter where life takes us, the game goes on. The laughter still rings, the heart still remembers. So when you find yourself lying awake, hearing the faintest echoes of your own childhood, those shouts, those footsteps, those endless games, listen closely. They are not just memories. They are the pulse of a life well lived, a gentle reminder that some things never really end. Thank you for joining me on this journey back to those golden days of childhood. I hope these stories carry you softly into your dreams tonight. If you enjoyed this, please stay tuned for more from Night Stories from VHS Era. Until then, may your heart always find its way back to that endless summer light.